Well, you clicked on one of Ilanchi Mali's videos. Great. Now here's the question. Are you going to watch it, share it, like it, get pissed and cuss me out in the comments? Just make sure it's at least 7 words minimum. Are you going to support the stories? Links to do that are down below. Just don't scroll in silence. Or do scroll in silence. I really don't give a damn, because sometimes silence is louder than words.
Hey everyone. Um, I want to get and say that I'm not a doctor and I'm not a professional in this field, and I'm not giving any kind of medical advice. I touched base on this yesterday, um, and I kind of wanted to take you inside the mind of somebody that's lived with family members with mental illness. Um, I even have a little bit of it because of the trauma that I've been through. And it wasn't due to my mother or my brother or anything like that. It's just growing up in that kind of environment. Um, as I said yesterday, my mom has schizophrenia. My brother also does. Um, he has the paranoia. My mom had the delusional. And the best thing that I could do is kind of express what that was like. Um, my mom was my mom. Uh, I know that some of y'all probably will watch some of my older videos, and I talk a lot about my dad. And I don't talk a lot about my mom. And I loved my mom. My mom was my mom. Uh, she loved me um, unconditionally. She loved my brother unconditionally. And I have to say that she was the best mom for what she was. Um, she didn't put up with the crap. You mess with the boys, messing with mom. My nanny, it was the same way with me and my brother. And I think sometimes my brother kind of got it off easy, but um, growing up, my mom would tell, she would get in her manic stages, and she would, I would sit and listen to the conversations she was having, you know, in her own mind. And guys, when I tell you there was days that I didn't sleep for days, I'm being honest. Because when my mom was on those highs, it was horrible. And the thing of it is, a lot of people don't understand this. Medications that are there, but they don't work all the time. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you get off your medication, routine, and that's just the nature of it. And my mom, it would go in these kind of things, and then you on top of that put that she only has a 12-year-old, mentality of how things are, and things like that. Um, but I did not realize this until after her passing, or actually some of it I learned before. Um, as I said yesterday about my father and my mom, my daddy, my mama. I didn't want to sound too polished. Daddy and mama. Uh, they and I told you about my aunt and the story of that. Uh, so I knew my dad was married one time to my aunt. Well, then I found another person that he was married to. I looked for kids there. Nothing there. My mom would tell me, or as I was listening, she kept mentioning Pat. Well, I have an aunt, and her name is Patsy, and she went by Pat. Actually, she changed her name from Pat to Pat, uh, and or Patsy. Um, but I thought my mom was talking about that. Well, as I started digging, and my mom would say that damn Pat, and I'm like, Mom, what about her? And she'd be like, your daddy, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. And I started looking into my family history, and lo and behold, I found a Patsy or Pat that my dad was married to after my mom and my dad had me. So I uncovered this Pat. When I didn't realize this, but I had made a call to a Pat Colbert a few years before then, trying to find my uncles and stuff. Lo and behold, I called this Pat. She was basically my stepmom. But she says, "Oh, you're looking for," and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I told her, and she's like, "Well, here's their number." Didn't know who she was, and if I would have, I would have, said, were you married to my dad?" But I hadn't uncovered that yet. That was the only time that. Sorry, guys, my insulin pump's going off. I'm 8 points above where I'm supposed to be. Anyway, so lo and behold, I should have been listening to my mom because everything she was talking about, I was uncovering. So, with me telling you that, I should have dinged in my head. But a lot of this stuff didn't come until after I'd found it in my family history. So I was like, well, do I have any brothers or sisters, or through that one? And I didn't. So when I talk about mental illness, I'm coming from me. I'm thinking my mom is making this stuff up, and I went to my Aunt Ann about this, and I said, Aunt Ann, did you know anything about this? And she knew about the second marriage, but she didn't know about. She was like, I thought that was just a girlfriend. No, I found a marriage and a marriage certificate. There was a marriage and then there was a divorce. And Aunt Ann always thought it was my mom was talking about my Aunt Pat, my dad's sister. I kept saying she had no really influence in our life. The only people that had influence on my life is my Uncle Billy, my Uncle Johnny, and my dad. And, well, my Aunt Arlene, but she was chill about stuff. So my mom was telling my she was telling good information. I was just registering as something different. So my mom was that part, and she was telling the truth. And I looked at when I found that out, I kind of started thinking, okay, so I'm missing so much of my family history. And but what I'm getting at is, even if you have, and it makes it kind of bad on the part, the because each one of these disabilities or learning disabilities, whatever you want to call them, they affect everybody differently. You know, there's people high functioning with schizophrenia, and they have a normal life. They just have, and that's the thing. But you add my mom being basically deaf, a second, a fourth grade education, basically. Uh, then you throw on top of all the moving parts of a family. And I can understand why they said, we don't want her having kids. But you know what? I'm I'm not gonna say I'm normal, okay? I'm not. But I have a brother that's in the, he goes through that stuff a lot. And and you know, I get sometimes frustrated. I really do. I get frustrated because I'm like, why can't, I have a normal life? Or why can't other other people that go through this, you know, to parents that have, kids and they have issues, but they have their own too. And this is kind of what I was talking about yesterday is, you know, a pastor saying my mom was demon possessed. And that, seriously, guys, that really irked me. And I wanted to go off. I did. And technically, I feel like I should have, but, I'm a better person. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna deal with this. I'm not gonna do what I really want to do, because I mean, what would have it gave me? But guys, when and I know everybody has their own thing that y'all deal with, but there's a lot of people that make fun and treat these people with disrespect. I have nothing but respect for my mom. I have respect for my brother, even though he gets on him and us get a lot. But people will call it whatever you want to call it. But just because, and what I've also had to learn is, and I'm trying to teach this to my brother, and he's always wanted to be a songwriter, and I tell him all the time. He'll ask me to he'll say, send this email to whoever. And when I look at his stuff, I'm like, Robert, that's not enough to get a song. It's like, y'all seen my poems. I spend a lot of time on my poems. And then I spend a lot of time editing and voiceover and cleaning the stuff up. It's a lot of work. But I love doing it, and I love creating that. I like, because it's who I am. It's who I am. But my mom's poem, she knew what she was talking about, and she was trying to show me in her own little way. Um, Speaking of disabilities, my aunt, of course, she took care of my mom, and I take care of my brother. But my aunt worked for the school district, and she was basically following me as I went through school. But she worked in the special education program, and she actually, the girl she took care of was in a wheelchair. She had spina bifida, and if any of y'all know, that's a very horrible. It's bad. But um, I grew up with my aunt, taking care of these kids and trying to make their lives better. And after I moved in back to our family home, and I started going through paperwork and pictures, I found a picture of my aunt with George Foreman. And come to find out, George Foreman lives about 40 minutes away from us. Somebody said he passed away. I don't know if he did or not. But I found a picture of my aunt, and I'm like, I was like, did you know Annie knew that? And he goes, I knew him too. And I'm like, what? I didn't know that. Some of y'all may know. Neil McCoy lives in my hometown. I've went across him several times. And guys, when I tell you he's redneck, he's redneck. He was in Berkshire's with pajama pants on, rain boots, and a shirt and a cap. And I still reckon, I was like, Neil, you can't fool me. But, and some of y'all may not know this. He is in called the Angel Network, and he does a lot of work with special needs kids and sponsors a lot of stuff. But these is you have to have some kind of compassion, and you have to understand. And there's a lot of people that can't deal with that kind of stuff, and it wore on me and wore on me and wore on me. As I said yesterday, I I didn't I didn't do the well with those kind of jokes. Uh, you know, as somebody that goes, I have IBS, and I have diabetes, and I have depression. I have not schizophrenia, uh, anxiety, PTSD. I have all those things, and it's a lot on somebody. Not knowing if your stomach's going to be upset. Not uh, I have the crystals in my ears get messed up, and I have to hang my head off the side of the bed. And what I've had to understand is I have to slow down and just do things on a not beat myself up. There's a lot of things at in my house that I beat myself up. Hush, hush. Uh, and I beat myself up. And what I've had to learn is I'll get the stuff done when I get it done. Uh, I there's a lot of things that in my house that it just aggravates me because I grew up here. I'm like, my auntie would kill me, blah 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 blah. But you know, I can't I can't do it as fast as I used to. Sure, guys. It's getting to be about 9:30 or nap o'clock. Um, but that's what I'm talking about. Is we have to understand. And guys, I could go on a big soapbox about how I feel about political stuff. And quite honestly, I don't, yeah, I do get on those tangents, and I will talk about them in my poems. If you will listen to my poems, I'm putting my heart into those things, and I truly feel what I feel. Um, but you know, things happen with life. For instance, there was I can't remember what the I think his name was Josh, and I found pictures of my aunt, and this he was he was dying, and he started getting the yellow tint and had the jaundice. I'm not for sure um what he had, but I started going through pictures, and all the kids that was in his class were all around him. He was laughing and cutting up. Those kids were laughing and cutting up, and they, I went, but I. This was after I got out of school, so I would have never known. Um, unless my aunt told me, and she never did really. Um, but kids and people with very visible disabilities uh, are some of they're the nicest kids. They're the most loving kids. Uh, I'll bring this out, and it is, I'm not trying to, but I've known kids that have that kind of, and they're very religious. Okay, I use that term loosely, but they have no strings attached to their. They just believe, and that's fine. My mom, on one hand, could care less. Really. My nanny was, of course, Methodist, but she says, "Well, if I'm going to hell, it'd be on an honest ticket." And I loved that uh, saying. And my mom would say it too, and she meant it. She didn't care. Um, and I think a lot of times religions kind of push a narrative on people. But guess what? If you look at kids that have disabilities, they talk about their faith, and that's fine. I there's a young man that is at our art walk, and he does paintings and books. And I was talking. He released a book, and he said it was talking about religion and God and stuff. And I read it. Pretty cool insights to me. Um, but you know, it takes a lot of effort to try to sit there and disprove and prove what somebody else already believes. My mom, straight up, I don't care what that pastor says. And it's kind of weird. Uh, it's a strange kind of thing when you grow up with these kind of issues. So, was it hard for me to grow up in this? Yes. It was very difficult, especially with family dynamics the way we had. Um, you know, I really don't know if I would change that fact that my mom had the issue she did, and my dad died when I was younger. If that would have not happened to me, I don't know. I probably wouldn't be the person I am today. I probably wouldn't be as laid back. I would probably be spoiled rotten and gone through some, you know, wild, been in and out of jail for, for stupid stuff or, I mean, I don't know how my life would have turned out, but I know how my life turned out with, having to deal with, and guys, and if you understand, yeah, I'm pretty sure some of y'all probably have similar stories. Um, but losing a parent and only remembering their the last feeling that you had with them. I've talked about it in previous episodes with my dad. Uh, you know, if I would have had a normal family, what would that have looked like? Would have I had the heart I have now? Would I have the creativity? And guys, let me tell you something. There was a lot of stuff that me and my aunt disagreed with each other. But it's kind of funny if y'all y'all know that I'm pretty creative on things. There was hours that me and my aunt would sit at our dining room table, not say a word, but she was making stuff and I was helping her, and I guess that's kind of where I get this from. I guess that's what we get my creativity. Um, but you know, having that creativity and having that insight, this having the insight of just creating out of your mind. You know, this is how I get rid of my stress. You know, that's what I do. A couple days ago, I was watching a YouTube, and my whole life, really, I've had an issue. A lot of people tell me I'm really cool, calm, and collected. I am to a point. Sometimes I get in one of those moods where I just get mad and I'm depressed. And I was watching this YouTube, and it, talking about anger, and you know I've kind of put it in practice. I've been doing it for several years, where trying to control that that part of me, and can't always be happy go lucky, but you sure can try. And mental illness sucks, and it's not, it wears on everybody involved. Um, and I ain't gonna lie, you know, there's days that you get mad, and you get mad and you feel like it's just one thing after another, mood swings. And you know my my youngest, she she has her days. I'm like, baby girl, just don't. You gotta have to shrug it off. And you know, I say this because I kind of understand that bullying. I don't want to sound like a preacher, um, because that's not what I am. Uh, and I refuse to. But uh, bullies need to understand. They sometimes you have to put a bully in their place. And I'm not talking about, but you have to stand up to them. We had several in our class, and as a class, we had to deal with it. And you know, I bring this up, and it's totally off. Well, not really, but this kid, he always bullied somebody, and he graduated with us. And a few weeks later, we get the word. I'm not gonna say it because I don't feel like, but they had found him and his dad, and he did do it. He left a note, and it was the saddest thing. And none of us knew that his mom passed away very young, and his dad had gotten cancer. And all through school, his dad, I mean, long battle. And he just couldn't take it anymore. The dad couldn't take it. And it's a sad story. And I think a lot of the times is we see a bully and we're like, he's just a jerk. But 9 times out of 10, something is wrong, and you don't know it until it's too late. Uh, Another instance, I was one of my classmates. His dad was our pastor for years, and I graduated with him. It's funny. His older sister uh, was oh, hang on. His older sister was a junior, and her boyfriend, well, husband now, was a senior. So of course, they get in because it's junior senior prom, no matter what. Well, my freshman year, his sister takes me to prom, and so she's like, pick out any, and we'll get him in. So, but he his his sister did that for me. So I went my freshman year, my sophomore year. Of course, I went my junior, my senior year. But shortly after we graduated, and he had talked to me about this in church. He's like, I don't want to be a preacher. I don't want to be it. And I said, then don't. He's like, yeah, but I'm letting down the family name because my dad, my grandfather, my great great grand. I'm like, just because they did it doesn't mean you need to do it. He's like, yeah, but I feel like I'm letting down the family, and I should be called to be a preacher, and he was not. I mean, you talk about rebel, rebel kid. And I told him all the time, don't do it then. Well, I don't want to make my dad have it back. Look, don't don't do it just because. And and we know that story. So, and you know, we don't know, and that's kind of why I try not to push religion, because religion is religion, and a lot of people can't determine between those two things. And but mental illness plays a lot into that. It Mental illness is things that happen to you through life, and they leave scars, they leave mental imaging of this stuff, and you cannot unsee what you've seen. And that's the thing, when we have to do better. We have to do better. We have to sit down and have a really deep conversation. And that's what's wrong with a lot of us in America right now. And I think it's all over the world because we've been through so much. So, in wrapping this up, guys, take the time and get to understand people that do have this, and we all have some form of mental illness. I don't care if you think you don't, you do. There's something mentally and chemically and physically burned into your head. If you see somebody that obviously has, don't don't act like they're inferior to you. Show real empathy, and get to understand the issues, and get to understand and it will open your eyes. I know, like I said, I thought my mom was, but she wasn't. She was telling the truth in her own little way. Anyway, that's my spiel for today, guys. I'll talk to y'all in the next one.